Hello.
Hello, Miss Nancy. Hey, everybody in Facebook land. It's Kim Lanham, and I have another one of the great ladies. I am so pleased today to have Miss Nancy Thompson, who is going to talk to us about this breed that we love so much. She's going to talk about her experience with this breed. She's going to teach you some things, so please pay attention. Get your notebook out, get your pen ready. She's got wonderful pictures to show and share with us about how her dogs looked, how they progressed, and she's going to tell us about what she and her late husband did with Georgia Dachs. If you all have looked at any pedigrees of smooth Dachshunds at all, I am sure you have seen Georgia Dachs. This lady is Georgia Dachs right here. So I'm so pleased to have you. Thank you so much, Miss Nancy, for taking the time on a Friday.
Well, thank you. I think I will enjoy this a lot.
I hope so. I know I will. All right. Well, tell us about Georgia Dachs. Tell us how you got that kennel name. How did you all come up with that?
I went to the University of Georgia and Georgia State. John went to Georgia State. We lived in Georgia, but we also lived in Snellville. Snellville Dachs didn't do it. We lived on Pinehurst. Pinehurst Dachs really didn't do it because we weren't raising trees. So we just went to Georgia Dachs, and it abbreviated easily. And we had 6 letters involved in the kennel name when we abbreviated, so we could name the dogs all kinds of things. And that's how we did that.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you told me that, because I think we do tend to try to look at our street name or, what can we come up with to use for a kennel name. So, all right. Well, tell me, how did you get started with Dachshunds? How did the two of you start this whole thing?
Well, when we first got married, John was in the National Guard, and he went for summer camp every summer, and I didn't like it particularly. I didn't like to be alone. So he decided we should have a puppy. And as totally novice people, we went to a pet store and bought a Dachshund, a miniature Dachshund. We thought she was beautiful. Unfortunately, she was also blind. We took our puppy back to the pet store and they replaced her, no problem. And then I asked, what are you going to do with her? Well, we're going to send her out and put her down. So then we had 2 Dachshunds.
Oh, then you had 2.
One blind and a seeing eye dog. So we had those, and a lot of our friends had Dachshunds. And John then had a client who knew we had Dachshunds, and he wanted us to find him a Dachshund, a show Dachshund. We had no idea. We didn't know what we were doing. John called around, and he found Bob Palmer of Choo Choo Kennels in Chattanooga. We made an appointment. We went up with our friend client and his wife and Amy, and we looked at dogs, and I was absolutely amazed because Bob's dogs did not look like our Dachshunds from the pet store. Not at all. I had no idea that Dachshunds could look like that.
Right.
And we ended up looking at a lot of puppies, and Amy and I were playing with a little black orphan puppy. And Rod picked out a dog, and it turned out that this particular puppy was a farm meadow light up the sky son out of Rites of Spring v. Westphalen. So, very nice lines. We had no idea, but that nice Dachshund. But while we were there just looking around at all of Bob's dogs, it turns out that Bob Palmer had a knack for breeding Dachshunds. He could look, and he did go to a lot of the winners, the top winners and the top winning kennels, and he picked dogs from there and bred. So when he had his Dachshunds, a lot of them were really outstanding. Some were not, but a lot of outstanding dogs. Well, we went home with our respected dogs because Rod decided that Amy and I should have the little black dog that we were looking at. That little black dog that we were looking at's name was Choo Choo's Georgie Marauder. He turned out to be a Moffat, Georgia Georgie son. We went home happy. Bob decided he was coming down later that year to check on Duke's progress, our friend's dog.
Mhm.
He invited us to go to the Metropolitan Atlanta Dachshund Club specialty. Never seen anything like that. It was wonderful.
Yes.
All of those dachshunds. And there were more dachshunds than the smooth dachshunds. We were so novice, we didn't even know that dachshunds came in. Well, we knew they came in sizes because we had two different sizes from the pet store. But wire hairs, long hairs, and smooths. Oh my goodness, candy store time. So, and then Bob looked at Duke and said he wasn't quite ready, but he looked at Sparky, the Georgie Marauder son, our dog, and said he was a show dog. John said, no, he's not. And we, of course, had no idea what a show dog was. And Bob said, yes, he is. You need to show this dog. And John said, no. He said, when are the dog shows? And Saturday and Sunday. John says, no, play golf. I'm not going to do this. I play golf. And I was thinking, yes, you think you play golf. Let's go to a dog show. So we entered the shows in Athens and Kennesaw. And up to Athens we went. Bob came down, and Sparky won. He went winner's dog and best of winners for 2 points. And it was like, oh, this is easy. So the next day we went to Kennesaw. We didn't win. Same dogs. I couldn't understand what was wrong. If you win one day, you should win the next day. What happens? Novice. Oh man. But the thing is I have a temper, and it kind of made me mad that those dogs that had not won the day before beat my dog. So Bob talked us into going to another dog show. We went down to Florida to Tampa. We had friends down there, so we figured we'd go visit and show the dogs. Good plan. Well, there were 3 days of dog shows, and Sparky won a major. He didn't win the other 2 days, but by this time I was kind of used to the idea that we might lose. Not real happy with it, but we might lose.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as it turned out, that was our very first show dog, and we did eventually finish Sparky. We did everything wrong with this dog. He had a questionable temperament, and this impressed upon us that dogs need a good temperament. They need to be pretty fearless. And then at this point, we were starting to read this. I mean, really, we already had a dog showing, and we finally decided to read the standard. I understand that this is kind of a problem with a lot of people.
Exactly.
And so we did start studying, and we found out that a lot of the names that had been thrown around at Bob's home were good names in Dachshunds. We also found out that Moffat's Georgie was something of a superstar as a producer. So John being John, and those people that knew John knew that he was a salesman and somewhat persistent. So he started calling, and he made contact with Thelma and Russ Moffat. They're lovely people, they really were. So they were very patient and talked to him. So our next trip was to the Moffats. Again, absolutely candy store time, beautiful dogs. We fell in love with Moffat's Harvest and Georgie. So we bought another dog from them. And in the meantime, John had been making contact, and he got in touch with Marcia Wheeler. And we found out about Willamar. And we went back to Bob's, and we bought Willamar's Leah of Meriden. She was also a Georgie daughter. Notice the theme here. We had no idea about what we were doing, but we were buying some dogs. And I also think people do that. You see some dogs, you buy some dogs. Maybe not the best idea. So we were really studying at this point, and someone gave us boxes of the old American Dachshunds, and we went to school. We were reading like crazy. John found some names, found some breeders that were alive that were in those magazines, and he started trying to call them. And he did get in touch with the Hangs, Fred Hang, out in California. And he was a lovely man and talked to John after about the 3rd call. But It did take a while.
Persistence.
Persistence.
Mhm.
And that's a good thing. Sometimes it can be annoying, but it is a good thing. So we then got started in the Dachshunds, and we were studying and we were looking to buy, and to get into this.
Mhm.
And we were really into the Moffat's line of dogs. We really liked that. We read the standards. We weren't 100% sure we knew what we were talking about, but we read those standards and we were going to dog shows at this point, watching the Dachshunds. And that was a good thing that we were doing, but we were happening into it. But at this point, Bob introduced us to Ed and Myrna Behringer. And Myrna and Ed were handlers. And they started showing our dogs. They were showing Sparky. And by the way, little Sparky, bless his heart, we were pretty persistent in getting Sparky finished. And it took 17 major reserves before we finished Sparky. Now, there is no way that we would ever do that later in our career. But at the beginning, we decided the boy had majors. He had 11, 12 points. We thought he ought to finish. Finish he did. But there was one time Ed was showing the dog. Maybe it was David Bolas. We told him when he went in the ring that Sparky was kind of upset that day and to watch him. Well, they were going around doing the dog show thing and were stacked on the ground. And David looked up at the judge and was watching the judge like you do when you're in a stack. He looked back down and there was no dog in front of him. Sparky had taken off, was around behind him. We have a really top-notch professional handler here with the dog behind the handler. So, but Sparky did finish with a 5-point major at a Dachshund specialty. But along the way, we also put Sparky on the cover of the Dachshund Reporter. Now, again, total novice. Michelle Billings was the judge, Ed Behringer the handler. It was best of all. So on the cover of the Dachshund Reporter, she's holding this single little best of all ribbon, and we had it on the cover. Nobody, somebody, really, we did that. So, it just, and then we had 2 Georgie sons, or a son and a daughter. And then we got word about a Dachshund that was for sale. And this Dachshund was supposed to be something truly special. And Bob told us that if we could get the dog, we would really have something in Dachshunds. And so John asked Ed to go with him. They drove to Virginia to see champion Boondocks Chucky Bunyan. Billy Mabram was getting out of the dogs, and the dog was boarded with Sandy Carlson. And John and Ed went up. She was moving the dog. John asked Ed what he said. He said, "Write a check quick." We did. We brought him home, and we had the start of something really wonderful. Mm-hmm. We didn't know it necessarily at the time. All I knew was that she'd spent entirely too much money. I mean, entirely too much money. We could have bought a used car for what we bought Chucky for in 1980, but we did that. So then we bought a wire bitch that Ed had bred. Dwayne's never say no. Mm-hmm. She had a terrible coat, but she finished with specialty majors and going best of op over specials at a specialty. She was very nice conformation-wise. Mm-hmm. Terrible coat. And we didn't know what to do with her. And Ed said, "Let's breed her." Mm-hmm. Whatever. So John calls Fred Hine because he had bred and wires. And then that's when we found out that that you could cross coat. We did not know that. And actually people didn't like it, still don't like it, but we did. And John and I were arguing about it. And John finally said, well, let's put them in the backyard. Nellie's in season. Let's see what they do. They did. We had 4 puppies, 4 champions. One of those was Georgia Dachs Jedediah, which, and so Chucky and Jed were showing at the same time. Now, not to be outdone, because we had now, we now knew 3 varieties. Look at that. John calls Dr. Ingeborg Kramer, who owned Ulysses.
Oh,
And she had a Ulysses son for sale. We purchased our dog, Zach, well, we called him Zeke, but he was a Ulysses son. And we then had Chucky, Jedediah, and Zeke to show. 3 specials. We had no idea what we were doing, but we had Ed to help. Amy was showing at this point, and she was still young, but she was showing. I was showing reluctantly, because this was never my part of this deal, was to show. So we were off, and we had dogs. So that's how it started. Wow. But we started with Chucky Bunyan, his son Jedediah, and a Ulysses son. Note, all 3 males. And a couple of females along the way, which is certainly not the way you probably ought to do this. You really ought to start with a bitch, a good bitch, as good a bitch as you can get, so that you can breed them. We started with the boys.
I hope y'all heard that. Start with a good bitch if you can, and go forward and breed them. So what, I guess I'm wondering, Miss Nancy, talk to us about the attributes. Once you all started breeding these dogs and showing these dogs, what attributes did you have to have? What in your family of dogs, what were you after every time that you had a litter? What were you aiming at every time? What attributes did you want to see come into that whelping pen?
After Sparky, we were interested in temperament. We wanted our dogs to have a good Dachshund temperament and to be friendly.
Yeah.
We also, at this point, had decided we had seen some really good Dachshunds in the early 80s. And we wanted really good movement, that floating movement with the good extension in the front, seeing the pads in the back, and ribbing. We wanted them to be, to have ribbing. We wanted them to be low. A lot of the wires that we saw at that point were very high, very long-legged dogs, a little bit short body and long-legged. And we really wanted the wires to look like the others. We thought all of them ought to look alike. And we read the standards and we interpreted it as the best we could at that point. But if we were starting now, I would highly recommend this, the illustrated standard that DCA is putting out. This would have saved us a huge amount of time. And it's just, if anybody should be able to follow this. And we discovered later on, but we'd already pretty well, this was it. This is what we were trying to do. And all of the proportions, I'm a math person. So I believe in the numbers. I'm geometry and statistics and calculus. So I wanted everything to be in the right proportions. But we weren't real sure. But if we'd had that standard, that illustrated standard, I think we would have saved a lot of time. But we were very, very lucky because we had such good dogs. I mean, Chucky was like, 5th or 6th generation top producer. Wow. And we had dogs from good kennels, and we just really, it was luck. It was luck and some very good breeders who happened to talk to us and spend some time with us. And we also followed Ed around a lot, and he gave us all kinds of pointers on grooming and showing and what we were looking for. So we went to school on everything that that man did. And I'm sure he was annoyed a lot of times with what we were doing. And truthfully, this was John's idea of this is what he was doing. He had the passion for it. And this is Chucky when he was showing. Chucky won a lot of groups, and he was our ideal of what a dachshund ought to be. We just believed that this was what a dachshund should be. And fortunately, he really is what a dachshund should be or was. So that really helped. And, I think that's where we were.
Mm-hmm. So folks, if you don't have the standard, please get one. Please get that booklet. I know we've talked about that before, and I know Lexa has mentioned that before, to take a look at that standard. It really does help. It will take you a long way and help you get started right. Okay. So Miss Nancy, Chucky was kind of the ideal dachshund. He was. So talk to me. I mean, you said movement is important to you. You want to see them look like they're floating around the ring. When you're looking at your puppies, talk to us about some of your puppies, about how you raised your puppies. I know you and I have talked about how you raised them to, you'd be vacuuming and bump into the, pen so that they got used to life, with people. Talk to us about the puppies, puppy raising, puppy evaluation. Talk to us about the puppies.
We would set our whelping pen up in our bedroom. And the puppies were whelped in our bedroom and raised while they were still in the puppy pen in our bedroom. And we had noise in there. We had kids. As soon as the puppies had their eyes open and they could move around and little ears were open, we started, like you said, running the vacuum cleaner, running the TV. I would come by, the whole group of us, Amy, John, and I, and we'd sit there beside the dogs and clap so they'd get used to funky noises. And you could always tell when their little ears had opened, because all of a sudden it was like, oh, shoot, what is happening? And, they were there. But it made such a difference. And we would invite neighborhood kids to come in and play with the puppies. And we started evaluating puppies, maybe as they were whelped. I mean, I know a lot of people say, you really can't tell anything. But yeah, you can. Before they get full, only on that first meal, you get an idea of ribbing. You get an idea of the length, some of the proportions, and things like that. And then once they start filling up and they become little flat, fat, chubby things, it's really hard to tell, but you can still look at their little heads and know if they've got pretty heads. And that little bee sting nose, everything, you've got it. You can see that.
Yeah.
But then we kind of, they kind of stay and they, lay there and eat. And eat.
And eat.
And eat. Then they start moving around. At that point, they got moved into the den, and we let them down on the floor, and we go down on the floor with them. And we spend a lot of time watching puppies move and making noises and doing things and see how everybody reacts. So we get an idea of the temperament. We really started evaluating the puppies as soon as we could get them to stand on a table. They really needed that. And we would sometimes feed them sitting up there. Not their whole meals, but just, lots of like bait and stuff like that. So they got used to it. It was okay. They weren't scared.
Right.
And so at 10 weeks, 10, 12 weeks, we evaluate. And the puppies, pretty much, everything's got to be there. They've got the ribs, the shoulders, all of that's there. And now sometimes our dogs would go through the teenage uglies.
Yeah.
They would look really fine about six months old. Then about 9 months, they'd kind of go fall apart. Different things would start. And so we had to kind of back off. But a lot of puppies were finished before they were 9 months old. And so but it's always, always with regard to the standard. And you can watch puppies in the pen and you know how they move. And if they hear a noise, they stand on their own and you can see what you've got. I mean, our evaluation was really like on the move with,
Mm-hmm.
and then we would keep watching. We didn't let anything go before 12 weeks,
Right.
nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And as we got further into it, the dogs that we liked, some of them we would keep until they were 6, 7 months old before we made a final decision.
Mm-hmm.
And our first litters were all champion litters. And this is because we had really good producers in the background. There were top producers all over their pedigrees.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also something that was a little unique, is that we had pretty much all champion pedigrees to begin with.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And also I would say to somebody that would be starting off now, put as much money as you can into your bitch or your dog. And again, if you can get a bitch, do it. If you have to take co-ownership from a breeder, do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because with that breeder comes all of their expertise, because they will usually help someone with their breeding. And you need someone to mentor. You need to find a mentor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good advice. I'm glad that you said that to start off with. Be willing, because I think sometimes the notion of co-ownership seems to, bother or turn off people, and it really can be beneficial. It really it's not a bad thing in my mind. So I'm glad you said that. Okay. Did you all go to matches or training classes to try to learn how to do this? What are the tips that you would give somebody who's okay, they've got this puppy, they think it's show quality, now what? How do me and the puppy learn to do this?
Well, we learned from Ed and Myrna Behringer.
Mm-hmm.
We learned how to show, how to groom, what to do with the animals and things like that. But we also did go to some puppy matches and there weren't a lot of training classes around in 1980 when we started.
Mm-hmm.
So that was not the thing. Plus, we were both working, and then Amy had activities.
Right.
So we had full-time jobs and, an active child.
Right.
So we did the dogs a lot so that we could travel with Amy, and we could do it as a family. It was a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, John had gotten injured while he was in the National Guard, and he had been extremely athletic and very competitive. And the dog showing gave him something that he could still compete in, rather than things. He used to travel as a bowler, because he was like a scratch handicap bowler.
Oh, wow.
And so he would go all over the country for tournaments. And that was gone because he hurt his legs. And he was a swimmer. He played basketball, baseball, all of those. He needed some competition. And we needed Amy to learn to deal with competition in an adult world. Or we thought.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I absolutely love the puppies and the dogs, and I like to travel. I cannot say that the dog shows were my passion. They were John's passion. And that was pretty much what we did. But we did go to some matches, and we did go to some, because it was a whole lot. I don't mean to sound totally economic, but it's cheaper in the long run if you spend more money up front to get a good dog and spend the time to train them.
Right.
You're going to dog shows, and a dog show is exactly what it says. It's a show.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are not ready, you haven't trained your puppy, you haven't trained yourself, you don't know what you're looking at. Like when you're going into show, you should spend a good bit of time watching the judge that you're going to show to, before you ever get close to your ring time, if possible, to see how they're going to do, what patterns they're going to use, what they, get an idea. If you don't know what your judge is looking for, you may get an idea when you're observing them. It's not, it's a very planned process.
Right. Well, talk to them a little bit, Miss Nancy, tell people about the practicality of doing this. You and I have talked about, having one litter a year. You and I have talked about how to manage dogs and life and children and, everything that goes with it. So I want you to talk to people about that because, they need to hear that you don't have to have, 5 or 6 litters a year to be successful in this. Talk to them about how you all kept things balanced.
We never had, well, one year we had 2 litters, but for the rest of the time, a max would have been a litter a year, and lots of times it was a litter every 2 years. But we bred, and we spent so much time studying pedigrees and planning our litters. And we did line breeding. We didn't really, and line breeding is a type of inbreeding, but we never did that first level of line breeding, like father-daughter, brother-sister type thing. We usually did like have, cousins, and we would sometimes do father-granddaughter. Now, one time we did breed Chucky to a daughter, Renee, and we got, we bred to Renee Bunyan, who was a Chucky daughter. But we had Chucky at stud at that point, and studs, when you have a stud, anything that goes wrong in the litter is usually the stud's fault. Mm-hmm. And so basically there was some issues with things that were being passed that people thought it was Chucky's fault. So we did a Chucky daughter breeding and got 5 puppies, 5 champion puppies. Now, if you continue, you may get lucky with inbreeding, but lots of times if you're going to do that, you're going to find out what the weaknesses are in your litter.
Sure.
You got to be prepared for that. Mm-hmm. But we got beautiful things, and so we said, not Chucky.
Right.
And so, but it just, we lived in a neighborhood, and we had, of course, the neighbor 2 doors down. Every time one of our dogs barked, he called. It was great fun. And we also, when we left and went to dog shows, we hired sitters to come to the house, stay with the dogs. Mm-hmm. And the sitters were not as conscientious as we were. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like there for a while, every time we left town, the police were called. I think they knew we were gone, and they called the police. So John's idea, being somewhat of an aggressive individual, he joined the city government. He started going to the city council meetings. He did all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so he was working at it from a government standpoint. I got a code book and started studying the codes. Mm-hmm. So every time they said something to me about the city codes, I gave them a complaint about somebody who was breaking city codes. So it got to be a war. John was on the council, when John was working with the city council, I was working with code books. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They said we couldn't park a van in the front yard. There were school buses parked. I got them not to be able to park. And I know that was probably ugly to the other people. There were some innocent folks that got messed up, but mm-hmm. It was what it was. And we finally got that off, and the neighbor moved. And then we had a new ordinance written so that you could have 8 dogs in the yard. Mm-hmm. We never had 8 dogs in the yard anyway. Mm-hmm. Our boys never got along. Mm-hmm. We would have dog fights if we had 8 dogs in the yard with more than one boy. Mm-hmm. Just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So we walked along, but during that time, I bought some land out in the country. I was ready to move. John was not going to give up. Anybody that knew John, this was like waving a flag, and he was not going to be intimidated. So we ended up staying in Snellville for 44 years. Wow. So the entire time Georgia Dachs was active, we were in Snellville in a neighborhood. But it's awkward, and more people have trouble with it. And with HOAs, you can't have dogs, not enough. But we never bred multiple litters. We did try to finish all of them. And anytime we bred a litter, once we bred that litter, we also knew where those puppies were going to be bred down the line. But we showed and finished pretty much all of our puppies. There were some, there were a couple that were pets, but we kind of figured we put the same work into raising a pet, it cost the same. So if they could finish, we were going to finish them. Plus, we didn't, after we got started and we knew what we were doing a little more, this was John's recreation. This was his competition thing. And we bred for ourselves to show and finish. And Amy and John were really good. Amy was a really good handler in her own right. She won a lot of groups herself. She won its specialties, and so she did very well with it. I'm not 100% sure. After a while, she got really tired of it, and she really never wanted anything to do with dog shows as she became an adult and got married, had kids of her own. No. In fact, her son kept saying he wanted to dog shows. Our dog show was our dogs. And Amy was, I don't really think you do. Let's go play basketball. Let's go shoot some basketball, type thing. But that was it. But it is difficult, and you have to pay attention to your neighbors, and you can't disrupt a neighborhood. But you also don't need, I have heard breeders and I've known breeders, if they've got facilities, they're breeding maybe 5 litters a year. And it makes it easier to be able to pick out winners. But if you're breeding 1 litter a year, you better pay attention to what you're doing, or you will make a mess in a hurry. But a lot of our, if we had 4 dogs, we were going to finish 4, maybe 3. And a lot of our litters, we have a lot of top producing bitches. They were only bred 1 time.
Wow.
They were right around 6 years old when they were bred because we specialed them. And it was a limiting thing, but it also made us pay a lot of attention. We spent a lot of time, if we were going outside our lines, we knew what we were looking for. We knew what we were looking at. And we did have some very successful outcrosses to other breeders. Probably one of the most successful ones was with K-Lad and Wing and a Prayer. That worked beautifully with our dogs. And another one that worked well was Neil and Helen Hamilton's dog, Millennium Falcon. He was not used a whole lot, but we liked him. And we used him several times, and we would get all champion litters. Wow. So these were good clicks. I suppose we were really lucky with it. I'm sorry, is this little window showing up on your thing, on your screen?
No.
Okay, I've got notifications that pop up. I'm looking at it now. Anyway,
we're good.
Okay. But the thing is if you're studying pedigrees and you look at what other people's dogs are producing, it will make a difference in your evaluation of your pedigrees. And you don't always just breed to a winner. Breeding to a top winner is attractive, and it will help sell puppies as show puppies. However, you don't always get what you think you're going to get. And you really need to see a dog. And this is something that y'all were asking later on down in your set of questions. And there's one thing about how dogs that look beautiful when they're standing,
right,
and don't look so wonderful when they're moving. They look beautiful when they're standing because they've got a good handler,
right,
that knows how to make them stand and hide falls. whether, and it's probably not major faults, or they wouldn't be in the ring, but it's the handler. It's training. If they look really good while they're standing and don't look good when they're moving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, a good dog, a really sound dog, does both. But they especially look good when they're moving.
Right. I hope y'all got that. They look good when they're moving. So how did you decide, Miss Nancy, you've got this dog, you've got your litter, you finished them all. Who came to the top? How'd you decide to special somebody?
Well, first, not all champions are specials.
Right.
The thing is a lot of our puppies, and they would win varieties, and they sometimes even won and placed in groups before they were finished. Now, this is a pretty good indicator that you might have a special.
Mm-hmm.
And we were showing before there were all of the different levels of championships. So you finished your championship and you became a special, or you finished your championship and you became a breeding prospect for somebody's best loved pet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so if our dogs did well, really well, while they were showing, we had a pretty good idea that they were going to be good specials. But the other thing is if you want to know, you think you've got a good prospect, and that has not happened, they've maybe matured a little later, put them out there, see what they do. Go against all comers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't just, show them, just in isolated instances. Put them in the ring with everybody. And if they're successful, keep it up. If they're not, okay, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
They're not meant for it. And if they don't like it, don't make them do it. It'll cost you more in nerves and anxiety than it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
Dogs that do well usually like it.
Right.
The last dog that John showed before he died, Kirby,
Mm-hmm.
Kirby was a character. And Kirby was absolutely dedicated to showing. And he would go around the wing. It was not pretty, but he would go around with his tongue hanging out, smiling. It's just like, really, Kirby? I mean, I was considering different, spices, things like that to rub on his tongue before he went in, but I was afraid he'd be going in the ring, shaking his head, blah, blah, blah. But the dog would go around the ring just, yeah, 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 I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is Kirby also would walk to the ring, but then he expected to ride back, because John showed him that mobility scooter.
Mm-hmm.
He expected to ride back to the motorhome, and he would sit up on the scooter waiting after he'd shown. Because the dogs know if they win.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, they really do.
Well, Miss Nancy, I want to come back to one thing. I want to talk about, you mentioned how your dogs clicked with a few others. So talk to people about finding that kind of click and finding partners, especially if you're in a situation where you're limited by your space or by your homeowners association agreement or whatever. Talk to people about why that's important, finding maybe some partners to help you do this and how you can help each other along the way.
Okay. With it being said already that you can train a dog to show, that you also, as the handler, you can stack your dog to their best advantage.
Mm-hmm.
But they still, they do have to move. But no dog is perfect.
Right.
There is something that you probably want to improve on every time you breed. So you want to go looking for that. You want to look for a dog. They may not have it as much as you would want, but they produce it. Like Wing produced always beautiful top lines, or in our opinion. When I say always, please understand it's relative. We thought so.
Right.
But it does not mean that everybody would think so.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a good thing. And his tail set was pretty. He moved. he was consistent also. I mean, he had champions, I think, with everybody he was bred to. This was a good plan. So we tried wing, but we always, if there was something that was even the least bit, we sometimes had dewlaps. John always thought a leash was to take care of that, but we wanted a cleaner neck.
Sure.
And that's not a fault, I mean it is, but it's not major, and you can certainly fix that.
Right.
But and tail sets. The last few times I was at shows, I noticed a lot of tail sets are high. I don't like that. And so we would want tail sets. And I know this is going to sound funny, but I like dachshunds that will look at you, and while you're talking to them, they kind of curl their lip up, and that they're listening. And we saw a couple of dogs that did that, and we thought, okay, we're going to have that. But but there are things that you just go for something that corrects your faults. And another thing I'd like to say, sometimes you can't get to the dog you think you want. Go look at their father. And I'm talking if you own a bitch, go look at the sire of the dog that you like. It may be that the sire will do it. Now, going all the way back to the beginning, to the Moffats, Harvest was the dog that I loved. I thought he was absolutely beautiful. But Georgie was the better producer, his brother. That's something you ought to consider. If you can't get to the dog you really want to begin with, don't be put off. There may be others in that dog's pedigree that you can get to. And but you always, if you can't be objective about your own dogs, you're not going to last, because you will make mistakes with those same faults. And again, and this is also out of order, I would never, ever breed to a dog with a serious fault. Ever. We didn't breed enough. We couldn't expect to take care of it. We just couldn't. So there was never any question about even thinking about that. We always went to the best we could get to.
Okay. Thank you for saying that. Let's see. Gosh, there's some other things that I wanted to talk about, but they're kind of on down our.
I went out of order.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. I want to make sure though we get to certain things. Now, I know you just said sometimes you need to look at maybe the dog you want to get to, maybe you can get to his father, or to his brother. You can't get to him. What about the girls? Because, I've read some things that say, you may have this beautiful flashy girl, and she's lovely, but she doesn't produce as well as maybe her less flashy, her sister. Yes, who may be more doggy or peasant style bitch, something like that. Can you tell us if you had experience like that, and how, to help kind of encourage people, because sometimes you think you've got, just what you want, but it's not producing, it's not showing you in the whelping pen, what you have to begin with. So I don't know if I'm clear on that, but
sometimes, a litter mate that isn't as flashy, but is sound.
Right.
Now, let's go with that. That's got to be the qualifier. Sometimes, let's go with a little bit of a different example and come back to this.
Okay.
People are a type.
Right.
You recognize that you've got a person, 2 eyes in the front of their head, a nose, a mouth, necks, all that sort of stuff. But there are pretty people, and there are not so pretty people.
Right.
And there are people that light up when you see them, and they're showy, they're sweet, they've got the personality. They may have a quiet sister.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's really okay. The sister's going to have the same genetic material. And sometimes they just do better. They're better mothers.
Mm-hmm.
And the mother, the bitch, the dam, controls so much.
Right.
I mean, I think they get it with the milk.
Mm-hmm.
If a mom's calm and they're not jumping around in the whelping box or things like that. And some bitches, just like some people, they're not good mothers.
Right. Right.
And it makes a difference with your puppies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something to consider. If you find something that you want and you can't get that, it's really okay. Go with the sound littermate or a sound aunt, or I would say with littermates though.
So do you think breeding is an art, or is it a science, or is it both?
It is both.
Yeah.
If you are looking at it, and I mean, it's just like showing is an art and a science.
Mm-hmm.
When you're looking at your dog and you're evaluating your dog for structure,
Mm-hmm.
you want certain ratios there, like rib to loin. And if you're talking about height and, coming down off the neck and the angles of the shoulders and the depth of chest, all of those things are numbers. They're all measurements. And you have to start with those things.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're looking at your pedigree, if you've got a very prepotent male or female in your pedigree several times,
Mm-hmm.
look at that. You want to figure out, I mean, you can figure the percentages. And if you've got 32 parents in there, you can figure out how many times that one parent shows up.
Right.
How much they're part of that percentage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the math person talking and the geometry person.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And, John was more the artist
Mm-hmm.
and the motion, the movement, all of that. He could look at a dog. He didn't really even have to have his hands on it. He could look at the dog and he knew.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I want to feel that dog. I want to know where everything is. But then I want to look at them. So I would do both. And so would he, but it is definitely both things.
Mm-hmm.
And you better start with the numbers and the science.
Okay.
The art.
Well, when you're breeding, do you think that the popular sire syndrome, does that harm a breed? Do you think? Kind of
Not
what
if the popular sire is the best. If the popular sire is just a winner, flashy, but is not totally sound,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
no, that's
Right.
not where you go.
Right.
But you've really, you got, and some people think that the top winner has to be the most sound dog, and that's just not true.
Mm-hmm. 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 Well, did you all show under breeder judges more or all breed judges more? What?
Both, and we were not particular on that.
Mm-hmm.
There were some of the all breed judges, like Michelle Billings and Houston and Toddy Clark, and so many others. There's really good all breed judges.
Mm-hmm.
They know what they're doing. They have an eye for a dog.
Yeah.
A particular breed is not necessarily going to mean that somebody can judge all breeds, but if somebody's really a good judge, they're a good judge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, but there's a lot to be said for breeder judges too. I mean, sometimes a breeder judge doesn't really want to become an all breed judge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think you need both. But the breeder judge is sometimes going to pick out some of the details that an all breed judge might not. And
Well,
but they're also going to have more prejudices towards things. One of the things that is the kind of a, if you know that you've got a good dog,
mhm,
a sound dog, and your dog, you go in the ring and you look around and your dog looks different from everybody else's dog in the ring,
mhm, mhm,
don't worry about it. If you know what you've got, and that's not going to be a novice usually, but if
right.
you're experienced and you've been at that a while and you can look around the ring and you're different, be happy. I don't think I want to go further with that.
Okay, I understand. Well, talk about health, Miss Nancy, because you know there's lots of testing that is, well, more testing that's available now. What what does health mean to you? Is it the
Everything.
absence of disease? What, talk about what it means. Talk about what it means.
Um, when we were when we were active, it was disc problems. It was going down.
Mhm.
And if we had any idea that there was problems, and not everybody was always very forthcoming
Right.
with what the disc problems were,
Mm-hmm.
but you tried real hard to make sure, or we tried very diligently to make sure that we didn't breed to a back problem. I mean, they're long dogs, they have problems.
Right.
And but if you double up on them, you're going to give that's heartache waiting to happen.
Right.
And the thing is not everybody's got, I mean, they may have the resources to do very well with their dogs, but not everybody can pay those vet bills that will be necessary for some problems with some dogs,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and you- if you breed it and you know it's there, shame on you.
Hope y'all heard that one. Okay. So why is it then, Ms. Nancy, that some people are so successful at breeding, not necessarily showing, but at breeding good dogs, and other people are 30 years later still a novice? What's the
I
difference
think
between
some
those people?
people are arrived at the sport and are predestined to be kennel blind. They cannot look at their dog and see what's wrong. Um, if you cannot evaluate your own animals honestly, you really don't need to be doing it, and you will never be good at it. And if you think that you are not getting it correctly, ask people that are successful at it to help you judge your dogs and listen to what they say.
Well, I think that, so it sounds like you're saying be brutal, be brutal.
Yes, and I will say that John knew how. I just wouldn't do it. If somebody wanted me to look at the dogs, I was very busy. But John would look at them, and if you didn't want to know what he actually thought, you really shouldn't ask. You shouldn't have asked him
Mhm.
because he was going to tell you.
Right.
He might be reluctant. He might put you off a couple of times,
Mhm.
but if you insisted, he would tell you.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think there are some breeders around that had that experience and were not happy with it.
Mhm. Mhm.
But there are a couple of breeders that were and listened and are very successful now and have some wonderful dogs.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure it wasn't just John that did it. I kind of surely they check. If somebody tells you something that you don't like, it's not gospel. You
Mhm.
can check with other people.
Right. Mm.
And also the gossip at show rings can be very discouraging.
Yes.
And I mean, there are sometimes you just walk away. And if you got a bottle of wine, open it.
Persevere, people, persevere. Oh my gosh. Well, let's see. What do you think about importing dogs, Miss Nancy? What do you think about the effect of that and what we may see in the show ring because of it? What I mean, I guess in the standard dogs, in the standard smooths. What do you think about that?
I think that different countries have different looks of dogs because they have different standards, not necessarily a standard, but different things are popular in different places.
Right.
And if you can go and see the dogs, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't see them, I wouldn't buy something on the basis of a picture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just wouldn't do it. And I think you are looking for problems if you do. We did buy one wire-haired Dachshund, and it was on the recommendation of another breeder. And we bought it with a friend and brought it back to the States. And it was high stationed, short bodied, had a wonderful coat, great personality. Would have been, and I think if we had been interested in performance dogs,
Mm-hmm.
that would have been his niche because he was from Germany, and that's different. They take that. I mean, not that the United States doesn't, but they're very serious about their performance dogs
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
live hunts and things like that.
Right.
But no, I want to be able to see
Mm-hmm.
and put my hands on the animals that I'm going to use or buy. Now, maybe a novice is not comfortable doing that, but you can certainly talk to someone and get someone with more experience to go with you.
Right. Ask for help, friends. Ask for help. So what do you think, what do you think the future looks like, Nancy, of our breed? What do you think it looks like? How's it looking from where you sit?
I'm not certain that I'm the best person to comment on that. My last dog shows were like in 2016 when I went to DCA,
Mhm.
and I saw some beautiful dogs there. But I really have not been active. And this was John's passion. And really, I'm talking with you today because John's not here. And I frankly went back to, he did an interview in 1997 for the Dachshund Review,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a lot of similar questions
Mm-hmm.
to what you've been asking.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through all of his answers and things like that and incorporated what he was saying in those answers.
Okay.
In 2016, I was ready to apply for my judge's license. And then it occurred to me that I wasn't as good as John. And I then had several friends that said, "Do you want to go to Europe?" Yes, yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Mm-hmm.
Because we traveled all over the United States and in motorhome and things. And because John was on a mobility scooter. And I wanted to travel in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me. Sounds good
Well,
to
I mean, it is what it is. And if you know it's not your strongest thing, I mean, I feel pretty good about I could judge,
me.
but John would have been better and it would have really made him happy.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, so is there any other advice that you want to give people starting out
Yes.
I know you've talked some about what they need to be doing, but is there, is there anything else? I want to make sure they hear you. So,
When you first start, it's very difficult to get people to talk to you, or at least in my experience. I mean, and if you were going to the shows, and that is what you need to do, please don't be put off if people are not willing to talk to you at ringside. You've got to remember that they are showing their dogs. They've put a lot of time into this. There's a lot of preparation. Their egos are on the line here. And they really may not have any opportunity or any inclination for small talk at ringside.
mhm,
Make contact, you know, ask if they can call you. Don't ask them to remember to call you, but ask if you can call them
sure.
and follow up on it
Mhm,
and go that way with it. It still may not get you anywhere.
mhm,
Because what you've got to remember is that a lot of breeders will spend time with people that think that they want to get into showing dogs, and they will spend your time. They may even get one of your dogs and then disappear, and that's tough. And you kind of get burned with that, and you're a little bit more leery of talking to somebody. But if someone is really going to be sincere and willing, can show that they're willing to put the time into it,
mhm,
people will talk to you. It may take a while,
mhm,
but people will talk to you. And you just have to be persistent, and you have to study. They have to feel like you have put some time into it. And sometimes it's a good idea to talk to a handler.
mhm. Right. So sit and watch, folks. Sit and watch and uh, watch people that have something that you like, and don't be afraid to say hi when they look like they're having a little bit of downtime and that they might be available to really see you and hear you. Don't be afraid. Introduce yourself. People are kinder than you think. So.
They really are. There is one thing that I do remember a line that John said. When we first started, because we started pretty much with Chucky Bunyan,
Mhm.
we thought we knew so much. We had arrived. And John said, I know several years later, he says, I know so much less now than when I started.
Mhm.
He said, it's amazing.
Wow.
And that was, and that is true. You are always learning
Right.
and spending, and if you're not, it's not going to be a good outcome.
Mhm.
You should always be learning. And what you're saying about looking at dogs now and what the future of it is, I think now may be as critical a time as we've had because of everything that's going on with the coronavirus and things like that. And the people that are starting now, the shows are not available.
Right.
And, it's just, and people have been hit financially, and a lot of breeding is not taking place.
Mhm.
And so getting started right now might be very difficult, and you're
Mhm.
going to need to be very persistent.
Right. Don't give up. Well, I know you have, I want to make sure I ask this. I know you've talked about Chucky, but is there anybody else? Any other dog?
Yes, Jedediah, Chucky's son.
Mhm.
And then there was a little girl, her name was Chantilly. Her name was Beefus, because she was such a chunk when she was a puppy. And Beefus, we would hold her up and aim her at people. She would get right up to them and go, "Ow," and bite their nose. She was just an adorable little dog.
Mhm.
And then there was Chandler. Chandler was on down the line, and Chandler didn't like to show. He was absolutely gorgeous. He was the sire of Juliet and Lolly, our best in show bitch. And Juliet, of course, was Kay's best in show. Kay
Right.
bred to Chandler. Chandler was the most stubborn dog. He was absolutely drop dead gorgeous. But you could put 3 leashes together, 3 show leads together,
Mhm.
walk away from him, and he would just stink eye, give you stink eye. And you could walk around him. You could take those leashes off of him, put him in there on the sofa, and he was like, I love you. Then there was Lolly, a line of bitches who would show for you. And they were happy showers. And they would take one picture. And then if they did anything else, forget it. It wasn't happening. We have pictures of our bitches with their rear ends to the judges because they were standing there looking. There are some that they're even just standing up. And I have looked for it, but we had a picture of Barbara Lovering. She was fussing at John because he couldn't get one of the bitches to stack. And John said, okay, you stack her. And there's a picture, and she's sitting there holding this dog, and she's got the head in a death grip. And up underneath here, and like this, you couldn't get those bitches to stack. I mean, they had done it. They were over it. And in fact, after Lolly won Best in Show, Kirby had started special, but it was still Lolly. And John put her up, and she would just bark and carry on when he put a leash on Kirby. And John would tell her, you're nothing but a yard dog, just a yard dog. And after that, after that treatment for about 6 months, she started showing beautifully. And she took a picture for 3 months. Then she was done with it again.
Oh my God.
But dachshunds are wonderful little creatures. And, we all know that.
Yeah.
They are stubborn. They are funny and hard to house train. And they're so worth it because they are amazing.
Well, I'm hearing you say it was all worth it then.
Absolutely. It was worth it. It was a wonderful thing to do with Amy and to travel. Because after we got into trouble with the barking dogs, we bought motorhomes. And we would load up the entire gang and off we'd go. And we parked a lot at parks, state parks. And I can remember so many times that the kids would see us putting the X pins up. And they'd be riding bicycles by and watch them come back and forth. Then they'd come, and after they'd see the dogs, they'd ask if they could, pet them. And our dogs were always, oh yeah, Eliza, kids. Then the kids would come up, knock on the door and say, can the dogs come out and play? But the traveling with the dogs and with our child, marvelous. Good stuff.
Precious memories.
Precious memories.
Well, Miss Nancy, is there anything else that you would like to talk about? Because I know every time I call you, we seem to talk for a long time. So we end up, there's an hour that's gone by.
Not to say that you're not a wonderful person to talk to, but I found myself talking to one of the people that called about my security system. And I thought, okay, I've had it. I got to get out of the house. I've been stuck in here long enough. So I think I'm done.
All right. Well, friends.
Thank you for this. I've enjoyed it.
I have too. I told you it was going to be fun. It was going to be fun. So I'm glad you were willing to do this. I appreciate you for this so much. And I hope that, these videos that we do can help people skip a step, can help them, aim their efforts, in the right direction so that they can, feel like they're making progress, that they've decided, they've endeavored to do this. Here's a roadmap, here's a roadmap from some of the people who have gone before you. And there's a lot you can learn from those who go before. Yeah, there is. There's a lot you can learn from those of us that go before. All right, Miss Nancy, hang back. I'm going to stop the recording, but hold on with me. All right, y'all. Bye. Have a good day. I hope you enjoyed it. We did.